to be on this platform, but here we are. So we can all be good sports. But this is a forum, which means that in a few minutes, we're going to unmute everybody, and then people are going to take turns speaking. What I'm here for mostly is to make sure everybody's taking turns. And just so you know, this is not a threat, but we do have the possibility to mute anybody who doesn't seem to be allowing other people to talk. So just self-facilitate yourself a teeny bit. If you find that you're listening to your voice talking again, just go, oh, maybe I should let somebody else have a chance. As we know, as everybody has said so far, last year with COVID was totally uncharted territory, and I'm really impressed with how market managers around the state did an absolutely fabulous job adapting to the various demands that were made of them, not only by their vendors and customers, but also in a lot of cases by their municipalities. The downtown market in Albuquerque was told basically by the city of Albuquerque, no, you can't open. But they quickly moved to establish a market so that their vendors would have a place to sell and that their customers would have a place to buy, because as we know, that's what farmers markets are all about, is vendors selling and customers being able to buy. And it seems like there's a force, and the force just makes it happen. Although in this case, it was a lot of market managers working very hard to make that possible. So we could all share a lot of stories about what happened, but we've only got an hour. So we're going to wait and do that maybe at happy hour tonight. It seems like a great happy hour topic if you're not following some of the other happy hour topics. But what I think would be useful for this particular forum is that people talk about what they learned as a result of COVID. Maybe some of what they learned about their customers, some of what they learned about their vendors, and some of what they learned about how they're going to be able to go forward with both this year, but just in general, with making their market a better and easier place to shop. So if you have something to say about that, we'd love to hear it. And
Sarah, do you want me to just go over the Zoom navigation real quick?
Why don't you, dear?
Okay. So everybody who just joined, I just wanted to go over just some housekeeping and Zoom webinar navigation. So at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see raise hand, Q&A, and chat. But since we have you as panelists, if you would like to take turns, and you can use your video and you can use your microphone. You have functions of both of those. But you can also use that chat feature where you can introduce yourself or just ask or make comments or receive help from either Michael or I. Or you can use the Q&A to ask questions. Or the raise hand function if you're not sure about any of those other functions, and we can reach out and give you a hand. We can also, Michael and I can put our phone numbers in the chat if you do have an issue, and you can either call or shoot us a text.
Okay, so maybe you guys can see me now. It's just all these technical miracles that we're getting to experience. But
Hello?
if anybody has some comments, I'd say just start talking and listening, because that's what the forums are pretty much all about.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm sorry, I don't see the raise hand on my screen. But I just wanted you to know that what appears as Roy Costley is actually Catherine Gordon from Nob Hill. I just wanted to do that. Now I'll remute myself.
Great, Catherine. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks.
I guess I'll kick it off if you don't mind. This is Matt Gretton from Matt's Mushroom Farm. And we got started with our production just as COVID hit. So we didn't actually have any of the experience that a normal farm has with establishing a market presence and developing customers. We ended up going straight to using some of the larger food aggregators who had made the jump from to digital platforms. So we were able to stock our product on their platform and then do sales through that. And that has made the process of us selling the product actually much easier because we can have fewer vendors that we're supplying, but we're still able to get access to some of the value that you get by supplying an almost direct to consumer product. So as a startup and a business that got going during COVID, I guess maybe I was able to skip some of the learning process, the bumps and the bruises that I normally would have expected to hit in trying to get some market share.
Yes, well, we certainly did notice a burst in CSAs last season, and a lot of farmers being able to go directly to CSAs, and that was a little bit difficult in some ways because it solved the farmer problem, but it solved the problem of the farmer who needed to sell their stuff. But it did make us a little bit worried that there would be less vendors at farmers markets. Fortunately, there was less sort of space at farmers markets due to the spacing requirements. But for the most part, a lot of markets came back at the end of the season and said, yeah, we had a really great season, all things considered. And all things considered, of course, we could go on and on with. But I also think that as a rule, farmers had an excellent season, given the fact that they went in sort of thinking, oh my gosh, no restaurants, smaller markets, what are we going to do? And then pretty soon, and somewhat due to our value chain coordinator, they all found themselves hooked up with one CSA or another, all of whom were dying for product. Danielle, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the experience that you had in Albuquerque and how you dealt with it?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle. I manage the Downtown Growers Market in Albuquerque. Last year, so I think we're probably one of the earliest markets to start that if you're not an all-around market. So we start the second week of April. So the pandemic stuff all started kind of to come into place in March. It was a lot of back and forth about whether or not we should even try to open. We ended up waiting to open our market until after the 4th of July at the park. And so prior to that, we did a farm to car pickup operation, which was similar to the rail yards. Got a lot of info from those folks. They were really great with helping and all of that. Yeah, it was a lot of jumping through hoops to try to get people connected safely still to our vendors. In all of that, I will say we saw a lot of farmers drop off. A bunch of folks went on to do their own CSAs or just have people pick up from their farms. And there was such a high demand for that local food and supporting local people that they were able to successfully step away from the market. We still had a bunch of people that participated. Once we were able to open back up, we were under a 25% capacity restriction, which was a lot to deal with. And especially just because of the nature of where our park is located, we don't have a single point of entry or exit. So we had to create one. Dealing with the vendors were pretty great. They jumped on, stepped up as far as like setting up their booths in a distanced manner, providing sanitizer, gloves, all that type of stuff. Customers overall were pretty great in understanding. There was definitely handfuls of people who, just as I'm sure everyone's experienced in general with the pandemic, about mask wearing and things like that. So we, this year, I'm definitely going to try to be more prepared with having our printed city permit, because we definitely had a lot of people pushing back at us that it was a public park, and so they didn't need to follow our rules, which is not the case. But yeah, overall, I mean, definitely not our best year as far as the amount of vendors we were able to support, farmers, all that type of stuff, money we bring in. We did see a significant use in the Double Up Food Bucks program, which was really great to see that utilized more. Yeah, and I guess looking towards this year, we were kind of hoping and expecting that things would loosen up a little bit more with how well things are going, but we are actually discovering that the city of Albuquerque is being more strict with us on how we're operating. We're still working on getting our permit approved. We're supplying them plans for each level of the public health order to try to get a plan in place for red, green, yellow, and turquoise. The only thing that we have been able to successfully, I guess, alter is that non-food vendors can be back at the markets, which the city was still interpreting from last year. But we did get that through at the state level to allow that, which we needed in order to be able to financially be able to offer our market so that we can fill our vendor spaces. But yeah, I guess I would say that it was rough. This year, we're planning to have more vendors at our market. And by the time we get to green, we're hoping to have all of our vendor spaces filled again, which will be, I guess, our biggest goal in all of this. So yeah, it's definitely been rough and draining and a lot of learning, and the online aspect has been a good experience overall, just in the sense that I don't think we would have attempted something like that if there hadn't been a pandemic, at least not last year. So that's just kind of been a stressful but beneficial learning experience, because now we all kind of know how to do it, and if we do want to continue to offer access to farmers in that way under our market, we can know how to do that now. So
Are you still looking for more produce vendors to fill spots, or are you filled now?
well, at this point, our application is closed. We take vendors, we take farmers, I guess, on a wait list basis after our application closes. So yes, I mean, we prioritize farmers, so we would work with someone if they're interested in selling at the market.
Okay, cool. I definitely am.
Okay, yeah, send us an email, we can get you figured out.
And is there anything that we can do, Danielle, as a group or as a market organization or as individuals to help the city get with it in terms of not making it more difficult for your market than it was last year? Just because that seems pretty obtrusive of them.
Well, I can tell you our experience, and I think Alaska should maybe speak on this too, because I think they experienced it more last year than we did. So when we started back up, I don't know if they just were still disorganized enough or something, I don't know, that we were able to operate the way we did last year. But this year, I mean, there's just some things that we're expected to do that they're interpreting as far as the state guidelines. So since we're classified under grocery, we're expected to be under those capacity limits, which I would argue we shouldn't be, since we're operating outside. And that really restricts and also puts a lot of stress on staff and our capacity limitations. But there's also just funny things like we can't have pets at the market, and that's because of a rule that goes with outdoor dining for restaurants, and that they're not allowing pets to sit on patios. And since we have vendors that do prepared foods, that they qualify as a restaurant, I guess. And so so things like that are coming down because of the capacity limits too. We're not allowing people to hang out at the park again, which is just a frustrating thing for customers, that if we have a line of people waiting to get in, that I have to go around and tell people they have to basically come shop as quick as they can and leave. And yeah, I mean, we're now also, like last year, our market didn't do this anyway, but they're telling us that we need to temp all of our vendors before they set up. And so just for our market, it's a tricky situation again, because we don't have one exit and entry point, and we have busy streets all around our park. So we're trying to figure out how to do that best with the city. And I guess I would argue that each vendor is their own business, and so they should maybe be controlling that themselves. But yeah, I mean, anything that would put less restrictions, but again, they're getting all of this from the state level. So this is, unless I guess we can do something more at the state level, just getting the non-food vendors allowed was kind of a success for us and the Albuquerque Growers Market Alliance. So yeah, anything that would loosen up the restrictions would be helpful for our markets.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is, because farmers markets just aren't that big on the radar of places like the city, they need probably pretty constant reminders that you're making it difficult for them, and maybe they could make it easier, and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think that we actually really are on their radar right now, because we're the only thing that can operate that's similar to an event. And so they're not allowing any, as far if people are trying to get permits through in Albuquerque, that's not a farmer's market, that's an event. They're basically, as far as I understand, not allowing things. I mean, so because we had also been looking into doing more art markets, because a lot of our non-food vendors have been really struggling this past year with opportunities, and they were basically saying absolutely not at this point. So so I think that actually they're looking at us more right now because we are going to be one of the only things that operates as an event style operation. And again, they're not going to budge on anything unless it changes at the state level. Like that's what they're all getting their information from what I understand.
Okay. And Andrea, you had to actually move the Silver City market so that you could be contained?
Well, it was an interesting situation for us because we are a year-round market, and we had been in a downtown location that was regulated by the city, if you want to use those words. And then they were doing some renovation to that site. So in August of 2019, we moved to a temporary location, which is the parking lot of what's going to be our someday expanded food co-op. And so we were basically in kind of an empty, unused site. And so in March, when the COVID regulations hit, what we found about this site that we were a little frustrated to have to move to is that it was really, what was nice about it was we could limit to one entrance and exit. And where we were meant to move back in April to the renovated location that we'd been at for many years, the vendors actually voted to stay at our temporary site, to the frustration of the city, because they were, hoping that we'd come back and use this spot they had renovated. And then I took some notes here as I was listening to Danielle, just to respond to some of the differences. We're not, since we were on, that was the other piece, since we were on private property that we had permission to be using, we were in a unique situation where we could really just create our own rules. And what happened where we are is the city and the county didn't really step up to create too much regulation. And so we really did just make it all up ourselves. And so we were able to limit capacity and regulate the vendors. I was really grateful for the Marketing Association so quickly responding with such clear regulations, because then I had a printed piece of paper that I could show people and say, look, this is what we're all doing. These are the safest decisions we can make for our community to keep things running. And so there was a lot of what we called hall monitoring, talking to people about mask wearing, where vendors didn't really fight back or didn't struggle so much with the regulations. I did find that I had to do a lot of just reminding people where we are food service. So standing behind your market table and eating that burrito, maybe you can find someone to cover your booth and then step away and eat and then wash your hands and come back and not eat and, serve food at the same time.
Okay,
Sorry,
I'm
I'm muted. I'm so sorry. A lot of the vendors who were serving single use or single item foods like prepared drinks, we asked them to stop bringing those because we were really encouraging people not to eat at market, to not, come to market for their first morning coffee, to not take their mask off. I had to have a lot of conversations with people about leaving to have conversation because the market was a public event. That's exactly, we had music normally all summer. We didn't have any music this summer. And it just was a lot of explaining to people why they couldn't stand in the middle of market and have conversations, especially because we had these like distance lines. That was the only issue with our temporary market spot, was that there wasn't a lot of space for lines. And so we'd have a line starting in the morning of anywhere from 60 to 100 people at the height of our market season. And then we'd let 40 people inside. We measured our area and decided how many, including our vendors, was the safe amount to have inside the market area. And then those folks would come in and then they'd line up socially distanced at each booth. And by the end of the season, we were really impressed to find out we could get 200 people through our market in the first hour, which was just what was, we had a great market season. Our double up went through the roof. We lost some vendors already at the beginning season, not to COVID. It was just a coincidence. One of our major produce suppliers started a CSA and another one retired. And so we did have concerns about, or I had concerns early in the season about there being enough food at market. And it just, every week I was always impressed to see new vendors coming out and our returning vendors to step up to fill the holes that were happening. Let's see what else. Anything else I can say here? I think, and what I wanted to mention is that we're starting to see, as our numbers are going down here, since we are a year-round market, we've run through the whole winter as well. We took most of February off. But what we've noticed since we started back up again is that we don't have that long line in the morning. And so we haven't had to close down the market. We haven't been putting the caution tape up. We've been leaving the back gate open. And so it's just been feeling really heartening to see that. We'll see what happens when our season picks up again, because we might very well need to go back to those lines. It's been nice for this winter time to just feel like we're returning to a time when we could come to market and shop and not. And as a manager, I don't have to spend so much time. I see people actually I look at them and they'll like pick their mask up over their nose or something. So I'm trying to undo being the hall monitor, because everybody's pretty well trained at this point on how we need to be together. And so.
I got somebody named Joe with his hand up. So Joe, you can take the floor, and thank you very much, Andrea, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I'm Joe Lifka with the South Valley Growers Market, and Rhonda Reiner here is sitting with me too. And can you hear me okay?
Kinda.
Okay. We had a pretty good year last year. It was our data jive with your data, double up food bucks and EBT was 150% of 2019. And we, being a small market, we did pretty well. We had to space our canopies out 10 feet and tie caution tape up between them. And we had to create a discrete entrance and exit at the street side. So, and all our vendors wore masks and the customers wore masks. We didn't have any problem with that. We had hand sanitizer at the market booth and had free surgical masks if people needed them. And we had to make a lot of portable signs to direct people to come to the entrance and use the exit. We also had a policy of no dogs except service dogs. All in all, it was a pretty good year, and we made up signs to put on each vendor's table that we asked customers not to touch the produce or any craft goods because of COVID, and we saw a lot of cooperation. And all this created a lot of extra work, but we found that was very positive response from our vendors. They all pitched in to make it work. So we were very happy with that. And the vendors all did anywhere from 125% to 175% increase over 2019. But the average for our market was 150% if it was 2019. And again, it was Double Up Food Bucks that was really working there for us. So we had some music, but it was acoustic. We didn't have any live amplified music, and the county was okay with that. We also encouraged vendors to wear gloves or use tongs. So we followed all the guidelines, and it worked pretty well. And we had a very good year. So that's
Great.
about it.
Thanks
I'd like
very
to
much.
say- I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Rhonda wants to say something.
I'd like to say one thing that we found when we were planning, we had this idea that everybody was going to want to grow their own garden, but we didn't know that all the seed places were going to run out of seeds. But we all, most of our vendors did starter plants, and that turned out to be a real success for everybody. So it's just something you might want to think about for this year too. It probably is going to do well.
I'm totally with you on that. I had a farmer friend last summer that just was blown away by how successful his plant start business was. He could hardly keep up with it. Hey, Sandra, what do you have to say? Sandra Groves, it's my understanding you had your hand up. Did we lose you?
Is that better?
Yes, there we go.
Okay. Our market went pretty good. Everybody followed the rules and everything. The vendors themselves made sure their customers were in line the way they were supposed to and follow the 6-foot rule. Once in a while, I'd have to tell 1 or 2 people, but as a whole rule, everybody followed the rules. We had hand sanitizer and everything, masks, gloves. Everybody was really good, and we had a good market considering we only had vegetables and stuff like that. But one of the biggest problems we had was because last year we didn't have any water in eastern New Mexico, and the grasshoppers ate a whole bunch of farmers' stuff that they had to replant 2 or 3 times. And about the 3rd time, when it got eaten again by the grasshoppers, they decided we're not going to do this. So we did have a very small market, but those that were there were did very well, And everybody followed. It wasn't really a big deal. We didn't have music either. And everybody just kind of followed the rules, and it was wonderful. We were out in the park we're always at Wales Park. And I had no problems getting my application approved and stuff. The city was very supportive of us having a market at Wales Park and stuff. So I was happy.
Yeah, we're sure hoping that we get some precip this year, but it's always a peril for markets to deal with that. Hopefully everybody will get more and more efficient with their water use.
Yes, that would be good too. We did have good snow this year, and we've had some good rain also already, which we haven't had in a long time. So that's good. Then that's the only thing I wanted to say and stuff. Other than that, I hope everybody has a good market this year.
Yeah, we all do. As I tell people frequently, the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association can't really exist without farmers and farmers markets. So we want to keep you guys all going so that we can continue to do the work that we do.
And we do appreciate the work everybody at the Farmers Market Association does, because you've really helped me out a lot. I know that.
Some of the markets that are opening a little bit later this season, or not later than usual, but later in the season, are you starting to hear from your local municipalities about what their expectations are, or are you just sort of going to go forward and pay attention to the various county codes to decide how you're going to proceed?
We'll
Andrew,
just go ahead. We're just going to go ahead and do what we always did, because we don't open till July and we close towards the end of October.
Great. Any other market managers out there have comments on that? I think the municipalities and the managers that were the happiest were the ones where they didn't really hear that much from their municipality. They just went ahead following the rules the best they could and hoped that everything would go well. Over in Gallup, which some of you guys are aware that Gallup, they shut the town down for a while because the incidence of COVID was so high. Many of you might have talked to the guy who was in charge of permitting the market. Carol Palmer, the market manager over there, had to work awfully hard to convince everybody that the market should still happen. And fortunately, the guy who was in charge at the city had a wife who was very attached to the market, which really helped because she was working on him at the same time that Carol was working on him. But the place that the market had been in the past was closed altogether, and they found a new place for the market. So that was definitely an adventure for the Gallup market. And Carol, if you're here and you have any additional comments, we'd love to hear from you. Carol also came up with some absolutely excellent signage that I'm going to try to share here. But in the meantime, Carol, let me know you're there. So speak up,
I'm here.
Please.
I'm here. So hello, everybody. It's nice to sort of see you. Yeah, Gallup. We're already a tiny market compared to a lot of you guys, but we got even smaller. So we didn't even have our first market until August 1st. So at that point, everybody had already been through a lot, and but everybody was pretty well trained. So I did, as Sarah is sharing here, I tried to come up with some signage that was a little more funny, you know, not so serious, because we do hate being the market police. And I didn't really have to do that too much. So that was a plus. But as Sarah said, we're usually in a place in Gallup called the Downtown Walkway, and it's actually not very accessible. So we ended up, the city was not budging at all. Nothing was happening. We're considered an event for them. So they didn't want that floodgate of other people saying, well, they're doing, why can't I do me? So I understand that. We ended up on a private stretch that was, Diocese of Gallup owns a shopping center that's been condemned, and the west end of that parking lot was where we ended up. So it was ugly as anything, but it turned out to be fantastic for a COVID market because we could set up far enough apart. People could actually kind of do a little bit of a drive-through farther away from the vendors, and even wave vendors over to their car. So it was a weird blessing in disguise. But as I said, we're tiny. So the highest number of vendors we ever had at one market was 7. And most of the time we had 4 vendors. And we only ran from August 1st to October 10th, the second Saturday of October, whatever that was. And so it was short and sweet. We had a great response from our customers, but again, a small customer base. because of our location, we were in a higher visibility spot. So once some of the weekend curfews ended, we got a lot more drive-by traffic of people that just said, oh, what's going on over there? Because there wasn't anything else going on in town. So, and as far as some of this signage, like this Sweet as a Peach, that was actually from maybe Kentucky. I got online and I was looking at what other markets were doing in other parts of the country. So that's where some of these sign ideas came from. They didn't just come from a vision that I had. So I really don't know how I feel about this coming season, though. It was, I don't know when we're going to be able to start or where we're going to be. So as Sarah said, thank goodness for Ben Welch. He was our biggest advocate with the city, and he helped me make the connection with the Diocese of Gallup. But the diocese thinks they're going to sell that property, so we may not have that spot if we have to do that this year. And so I don't know. Our other spot is still under construction. So we'll see. It's quite a year.
Thank you very much for sending the signage, Carol. It's pretty inspiring. And I really wanted to share this morning when Jeff Whitty was talking about some of the rules that are being applied to markets but aren't being applied to grocery stores because of the fact that there's so many less hands when you're shopping at the farmer's market than when you're shopping at a grocery store. But if you don't shop at farmers markets, you don't necessarily think about that. So this was a helpful graphic, and I'm sure it made everybody kind of go, oh yeah, that's true. Because with your regular produce, you really don't know how many hands have touched it by the time it ends up in yours.
Yeah, I think some of the signage did help. This one came from Illinois Farmers Marketing Association because they have a lot more going on, and they were really trying to get things together. But I really liked their graphic. I liked the simplicity of how they had it laid out. So I didn't want to recreate it from scratch. So I just cropped off their contact information at the bottom. But yeah. And I really appreciate all the support that Sarah and Denise and everybody at NMFMA tried to provide. You know, if the city had been more flexible, that would have made a difference. But really, we were, you know, it was a mixed bag because people were upset that the flea market wasn't happening. Gallup Flea Market is a big deal. They were upset that they couldn't do their own thing. And so we really didn't even promote the market that much because it was kind of a touch point with people. They were happy to have it, but then they weren't happy to have it. So because it just reminded everybody of what else they couldn't do.
Yep. A lot of reminders of what we can't do. And hopefully going forward into this season, there'll be some things that we can start redoing, like maybe possibly music at the market. We'll have to see about that. I know that different markets dealt with that in a slightly different way, but it was another one of those things where it seemed like if we're trying to minimize the amount of time, the amount of people at the market, at the same time that we're trying to minimize the amount of reason for people to stick around the market, that not having music seemed like kind of a no-brainer. And different markets interpreted that particular rule a little bit differently also.
And Sarah, Pete Withers had his hand up a little bit ago.
Great. Well, let's hear from him. Who did you say? Sorry.
Pete Withers.
Pete. Yep. Pete, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey guys, Pete here.
Oh.
I'm with Oaks Folly Farm. Can you hear me okay?
No,
Not
you're really quiet. Are you able to get closer to the microphone?
Really quiet. Let me get closer. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Better.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm with Oaks Folly Farm. Last year we had the Cedar Crest Farmers Market, and we also had a farm stand up in Cedar Crest for just our farm and some other local vendors, farmer friends. But you guys have covered most of the the highs and lows of the market season, but it was really helpful to get the ongoing guidance from you guys at NMFMA, and that really helped, and people seem to appreciate and respect that for the most part. I had a lot of musicians coming up to me asking, why can't we play music? And that was kind of a no-brainer last year, but I hope that eases. And if you guys put out further guidance, I'm sure I would appreciate that as well as others. I have not heard anything from the state, but we're just going to kind of make it up as we go. And I think the vendors have been great. Customers and the local community have been, really appreciative that we're there. And seems like a lot of people are really looking to evaluate where their food comes from. So I did want to give a big shout out to Sarah Thompson and all the support she gave with the Double Up Food Bucks. And like all the rest of you have said, it is a huge success. So I think a lot of people really, because of all the notices that went out, really started using that. So really looking forward to a good season this year, both at the farmers market and at our farm stand. So that's it.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah. And I'm curious about one thing, and then I'd love Sarah to be able to talk a little bit about some of the reasons that she feels like there were so many more Double Up Food Bucks coming into the market, which absolutely was fabulous. But the one question I have is, how many markets were actually visited by city or county or any sort of municipal inspector over the course of the market? Was that something that a lot of people experienced? Well, I know you, Danielle, they practically, they were all over you. But just as a rule, maybe we have a little show of hands. How many people were actually visited or in any way monitored by their local municipality? No visits or anything like that?
Well, this is Pete here again. I can tell you, we had tons of visits from, we had, like 3 visits from the county, and we had USDA inspectors come up regularly, testing meat temperatures and that kind of stuff. So yes, we had more than we were comfortable with.
And that was at the market, Pete. It wasn't at the farm stand, or both?
Both.
Both. Okay. And Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about what people might be able to expect as far as Double Up for this season in terms of an increase in the distribution of EBT, et cetera?
For this year, I expect at the beginning of the year, it's still going to be pretty heavy usage. So far, it's the numbers of transactions and the amount of money that's been spent is still pretty high compared to other Februaries and other Januaries. It kind of depends on how long the USDA continues to put full benefits on the EBT cards. Full benefits means, let's say you had a family of 4 and you're making like almost nothing. You're going to get a few $100s on your EBT card. But if you're a family of 4 and you're making, like $50 under whatever the limit is for a family of 4, you're just going to get $25. So that is one of the reasons that it was so high last year. And it will continue, I imagine, to be high until that stops happening. There aren't any new charges for pandemic EBT right now. So those cards should probably go away even if they haven't already.
So you're saying in so many words that there might be less EBT money this summer unless you hear something differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure what the new CARES Act funding is going to do, but I haven't heard anything about the money, that extra funding on the EBT cards going away yet, which is good.
Yep. Okay, well, hopefully they'll keep that that'll be active through July, although as probably most of you guys know, the absolute biggest months for Double Up Food Bucks are August and September, which is, peak harvest. And it's always remarkable at the NMFMA, we're always trying to keep up with sending you guys money for all of the participation that you're getting on the ground.
And then Sarah, Joe had his hand up again, and then Aaron and Bonnie have their hand up after him.
I'm going to start with Aaron and Bonnie because we've already heard from Joe, and then we can probably go to Joe. Thanks.
Hi. I was wondering, so Sarah, when you see the extra funding, I know at the Farmington market and the San Juan County markets, we were not prepared for the PEBT cards. And that was a huge source of confusion that they gave out in all of the public schools. We didn't know if we could double them. And there wasn't any messaging given to the people at the schools that they could actually double those dollars. And so I feel like it was a big missed opportunity because they went out to every parent at a low income school, which is essentially every parent in San Juan County. So we were flooded with them once kind of the messaging got around that they could double it at the market. But I wonder if that were happening again, if there were a plan for how we could get some messaging to those participants so that they would know they could double it at the market.
I think the answer to that is this year we'd be actually prepared to do something like that. It came out so fast last year that it was tough to get messaging out to anybody.
Yeah, and is there a way, Sarah, that you would find out about that? And if you did, would you have, 3 days warning, or would you have more like a week or two? Because it seemed last year like it was a pretty spontaneous act. It was a great act, but it was pretty spontaneous, and suddenly, wow, there was a lot to be paying attention to.
Yeah, so part of the problem with last year too was the Department of Health rolled that stuff out, but instead of the Human Services Department, and the EBT cards are with the Human Services Department. So they had to talk to each other and PED. It was really tough for the state agencies to work together to get all of the kids the money, and where was the money going, and nobody really knew. I know that Denise and I had a meeting with them, and they were like, we don't know what we're doing. We're trying. So yeah, it was very quick. If it happened again this year, it would probably be a lot easier. They might do it over the summer when schools get closed. So right now though, all of the kids can go pick up lunches and breakfast and lots of food at the schools. They just have to go pick it up.
Yeah, well, and the thing last year, and even to a large degree this year, is last year everybody was in total shock. At this point this year, we're still all in shock, but we're a little bit more used to what's going on, a little bit. But everything's kind of changing all of the time. So it's a little bit day by day, especially with the county color codes, as to what particular code you'll be in at the time that your market's opening and stuff like that. So it is a lot of information to try to track. At the same time, I think the more influence we can have on the governor about how to be going forward with markets and how to keep us as informed as possible, that would all be great. And Joe, if you still have something to say, go ahead.
Well, it's Rhonda. I'm going to say something. I think the scale of one's market, what size it was, really kind of expanded or limited their creativity. In our case, we're so small, we didn't think big. And when I say think big, it's like I was really impressed by some of the markets who did all these virtual sales points. That was just wonderful. And we never thought like that because we were small. So your circumstances really does determine how big you think, how creative you think, or in different ways. We were more like practical, but we didn't kind of get out of the box. And I was just impressed by downtown and Corrales and other markets that just had these wonderful sites that you could go on, because we never thought about that.
Yeah, we had 12 or 14 vendors, and we operated pretty much normal, except we just followed the guidelines as I outlined earlier, and it went pretty well. And we had good cooperation from all the vendors who pitched in to make it work. So it was a very positive experience.
Well, and I heard from a lot of vendors, especially in Santa Fe. They said, "Wow, now it's really like a farmer's market." Because in Santa Fe, there's always been a number of food vendors, and there's sometimes not exactly crafts vendors, but a couple of vendors were pretty excited by how, because it was a farmer's market, the only things that were allowed were essential things like food, and the non-food vendors weren't very happy, and probably some of the customers weren't all that happy because they couldn't eat at the market. But at the same time, I think most customers were just really thrilled that they could continue to shop. And of course, in Santa Fe, where they weren't really ever able to monitor how many people were in there at a time, there were some pretty strong signage at the front of the market that said, "Don't stick around, please shop and leave," which, is counter to everything that we've done for years at farmers markets in terms of trying to encourage people to come to the market and then stick around because maybe they'll shop more. So that was an interesting change that had kind of mixed reviews.
Okay, we're done.
Great. Anybody else have some comments?
I have something to say just in response to what Sarah was saying about Double Up Food Bucks, and I guess it's regarding the fact that we did do a year-round winter market this year, and people are still getting all that EBT money. We have a lot of people stocking up, buying like bulk meat from our grass-fed meat vendor, and who come back every week for some of the baked goods. And they run quite a bit on their card weekly with very little produce at market. I actually just had to order more Double Up tokens today because I'm completely out of them as of last week. And so that's going to be interesting. I know that it's nice to be able to track those numbers, because I know that there's like $3,000 out right now in Double Up tokens that I imagine will all come back. But that's, I guess, one of my concerns is, as usual, not having enough produce, but really now that all this Double Up is out waiting for produce season, that there's going to be another big rush with those Double Up dollars.
And in terms of vendor applications, are people noticing their vendor applications being a little higher this year, a little lower this year, kind of on a par? Any comments about that?
We've had a lot of interest in new food producers coming out to market, and I was so happy to see those cottage industry rules, the legislation that happened around that this year, because we haven't really had any new producers because of those, the difficulty getting through the whole commercial kitchen aspect.
Yeah.
We saw about 100 less applicants this year than we normally do.
Farmer applicants you're talking about?
Just in general, overall. Farmer applicants, I think we maybe saw, maybe 10 to 20 less than we normally do.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Other comments about that from other market managers?
I have something different. I can't find the hand raising function, and this is Jackie Rossignol from REMA.
Don't worry, Jackie. Just keep talking.
Can I made a point of watching this today because we had a huge problem. The market never opened, but we had food circles, and they're on private property, and that solved a huge problem. So each subdivision had its own food circle. And the downside of that is we lost all our out of town customers, but the farmers loved it. I mean, so the market going forward, for me, I resigned 18 months ago and I'm still here. It's such a small town and it was so stressed out. I've lost, you know, people are resigning from the board and people are not available to, like I kept saying, if we open the market, who's going to volunteer to do all the monitoring? And so the food circles worked so great that I think going forward, we're going to stay with food circles. And the problem that I'm having as a volunteer with reopening the market is the politics. And I didn't hear anybody bring this up. We have, I guess the best example I can give is when I went to vote at the fire department this year back in November, there were people in the parking lot harassing Democrats. And so we have a very staunch progressive faction and a very staunch conservative Republican faction, and they would bring all this up. I mean, on food circle posts about how there was no virus, that it was all being made up, that, you know, I said, who's going to volunteer to enforce a mask, you know, mandate at the Rama Farmers Market? It's like, that's my biggest problem. And so I'm trying to think, I have there's one good volunteer who says, well, we'll just open, right? And I'm going, I don't know, you know, what's going to be happening in June. We actually usually do open in June. And I just wondered if anybody else ran into this weird, it's a very, very small community. It's like one person bails and it has all these repercussions, or one person gets very aggressive politically and it just has, and that's why the food circles were so great, because they were on private property and the, you know, the owner of the property could enforce its rules. And, but the idea of going into downtown Rama and trying to open the market when I have no volunteers and I resigned, you know, 18 months ago, it's, did anybody else have this kind of crisis? Because as long as we have the food circles, we'll continue, okay? So I'm not worried about the whole thing collapsing, but food circles also pull away from the market, you know. It's like, I haven't heard anybody else talking about any of this, and maybe it's just, we may be the only market that is coping with this.
Hello all, you are not the only market. This is Jane Darland with Colleen Davis, Sierra County. Our market is in Truth or Consequences, and we did have difficulty. And what we decided to do is just shut down for a couple of weeks. And once we were shut down, so many people missed the market so much that there was an overwhelming support of the market. And those people came out and helped us tamp down any problems of people saying that, you know, the park was public and they didn't have to wear a mask, even though we told them that for these hours, it's not public. There's a contract and we have to follow the state and county rules. But, you know, those people came out in support of us because they missed the market so much, and we didn't have a problem after that.
Thanks for that.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for that. And we are just about on time. And as we are trying to get everything on the agenda happening when it's supposed to, we're going to wrap up this session. Thank everybody for your participation. Thank everybody for getting their markets up and running last summer. It really, really, really made a huge difference to your customers and your vendors. And I know it was a heroic effort all the way around. And just to recognize Jackie, who I think has been trying to resign as market manager for at least the last 3 or 4 years, and just keeps on being there for it because that's where her heart is. And the community of Rama will owe her a huge debt, but it's not just Jackie who's such a fierce market manager. Fortunately, we have them all over the state, and we have nothing but gratitude for you guys. Quite literally, we can't do it without you. So thanks everybody once again, and we'll keep on keeping on here. And just take a minute, because you can, to see who's on the screen, because they're familiar faces, and it'll make you happy. Anybody who doesn't have their video on, you could turn it on just for a minute so that we can all see each other. And again, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this format of the meeting a whole lot better than this morning when everybody was invisible. So we're gonna have to see if maybe we can just, we'll have to see if we do this for the rest of the sessions or not. You know, it's a learning curve for all of us, but thank you all for being here today. And I think we should have an ad campaign. I assume Christina is on here on the call. I think we should do something about fierce market managers and fierce farmers and fierce food advocates. It's just so true. So yeah,